The gunshot that ended Jacob Montgomery's life didn't just echo through the canyon outside Malad City, Idaho. It changed everything for the woman who had scrubbed his floors for $3 a week. Catherine Vale stood in the dusty office of Montgomery's lawyer, her calloused hands twisted in the fabric of her patched dress, unable to comprehend the words being spoken to her. She had walked 2 miles from the boarding house where she rented a corner of an attic room, summoned by a formal letter that she'd had to ask the postmaster to read aloud because her reading skills were rudimentary at best. "Miss Vale, I understand this comes as quite a shock," Mr. Pemberton said, adjusting his spectacles as he studied the document before him. "But Mr. Montgomery's will is quite clear. He left the entirety of the Double M Ranch to you, all 40,000 acres, the livestock, the buildings, everything." Catherine's knees threatened to buckle. "There must be some mistake. I was just his cleaning woman. I barely spoke to the man except to receive instructions about which rooms needed attention." "No mistake, I assure you." Pemberton cleared his throat. "Mr. Montgomery was quite specific. He dictated this will to me personally just 3 weeks before his death. He stated that you were the only person in this entire town who had shown him genuine kindness without expecting anything in return. He said you treated him like a human being rather than a source of wealth." The memory came back to Catherine then, sharp and clear. She'd found Jacob Montgomery sitting in his study late one evening, his face buried in his hands, shoulders shaking with sobs. Rather than retreat quietly as most servants would have done, she'd paused and asked if he was all right. They talked for 2 hours that night about his late wife, about his estranged son who had died in a saloon fight in Denver, about the crushing loneliness that all his money couldn't cure. After that, he'd sometimes ask her to sit and have coffee with him while she worked, and they'd developed an unlikely friendship. "His nephews won't take kindly to this," Catherine said quietly. She'd seen Marcus and Luther Montgomery around town loud, aggressive men who spent their uncle's money freely at the saloon and gambling houses, already counting their inheritance before the old man was cold in his grave. "That's not your concern," Pemberton said, though his expression suggested otherwise. "The will is legally binding. However, I must warn you that taking possession of the property may prove challenging. The nephews have been living at the ranch for the past 6 months, and they've brought in several men loyal to them. They are unlikely to leave voluntarily." Catherine walked out of that office into the bright September sunshine of 1884, her mind reeling. She owned nothing but the dress on her back, 2 other dresses only slightly less threadbare, and a broken silver locket her mother had given her before the fever took her. Now, apparently, she owned the largest ranch in southeastern Idaho. The absurdity of it would have made her laugh if the situation weren't so terrifying. She'd survived 23 years through grit and determination, but she'd never faced anything like this. Her father had died in a mining accident when she was 12, and her mother had passed 2 years later, leaving Catherine to fend for herself. She'd worked as a laundress, a cook, a cleaning woman, whatever would earn her enough to survive. The idea that she now owned property worth tens of thousands of dollars felt like a fever dream. Word spread through Malad City faster than a prairie fire. By the time Catherine made it back to the boarding house, Mrs. Henderson, the proprietress, was waiting for her with a calculating expression. "I hear you've come into some property, Miss Vale," the older woman said, her tone suddenly obsequious where it had always been merely tolerant. "I suppose you'll be wanting better accommodations now." "I'll be wanting the same corner I've been renting," Catherine said firmly, "until I can actually take possession of what I've inherited." She didn't mention that she had exactly 17 cents to her name. The lawyer had explained that the ranch's accounts were substantial, but she couldn't access them until she formally took ownership of the property, which meant somehow evicting the nephews who had already made their intentions clear around town. They would contest the will and fight tooth and nail to keep what they considered rightfully theirs. Catherine spent a sleepless night in her corner of the attic, listening to the sounds of the other residents and thinking about her impossible situation. She'd never even been to the Double M Ranch, though everyone in town knew of it. It lay in a broad valley 15 miles north of town, with rich grassland watered by mountain streams, thousands of cattle, dozens of horses, and a ranch house that was spoken of in reverent tones by those who'd seen it. The next morning, she made her way to the general store to buy the few supplies she could afford with her remaining coins. That's where she first saw Tyler Callahan. He stood at the counter settling an account, tall and lean with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of a high mountain lake. His clothes were worn but clean, his movements economical and purposeful. When he turned and nearly bumped into Catherine, he immediately steadied her with one hand, his grip gentle but firm. "Pardon me, miss," he said, his voice a low drawl that spoke of Texas or maybe Kansas. "Wasn't watching where I was going." "No harm done," Catherine said, stepping back. She noticed the way the shopkeeper, Mr. Walsh, was looking at the cowboy with barely concealed irritation. "That settles my account," Tyler said, sliding coins across the counter. "I'll be moving on from the Double M by week's end." "About time," Walsh muttered. "Your kind isn't welcome around here anymore." Something in the cowboy's expression shuddered, but he simply tipped his hat and moved toward the door. Catherine watched him go, noting the proud set of his shoulders despite the obvious dismissal. "Who was that?" she asked Walsh as she approached the counter with her meager purchases. "Tyler Callahan. Been the foreman at the Double M for 5 years, but that's coming to an end now that old Montgomery's dead. His nephews have made it clear they're cleaning house, bringing in their own men." Walsh's expression shifted as he recognized Catherine. "Though I suppose that's your concern now, Miss Vale, if the gossip is true." "It's true," Catherine said quietly, "though I'm not sure what I can do about it. Best advice, sell out to the nephews for whatever they'll offer and count yourself lucky. A woman alone has no business trying to run a ranch that size, and those boys won't make it easy for you." Catherine made her purchases in silence, but her mind was working. A foreman with 5 years' experience, being forced out by men who had no legal right to the property. A man who clearly knew the ranch inside and out. As she stepped out into the morning sun, she saw Tyler Callahan loading supplies onto a sturdy bay horse at the hitching rail. "Mr. Callahan," she called out, surprising herself with her boldness. He turned, his expression wary. "Yes, miss." "I'm Catherine Vale. I inherited the Double M from Jacob Montgomery." His eyes widened slightly, the first crack in his carefully neutral expression. "The cleaning woman. Yes, I heard something about that. The nephews are fit to be tied." "I imagine they are." Catherine moved closer, lowering her voice. "Mr. Walsh said you've been foreman for 5 years. That means you know the ranch better than anyone." "I do." His gaze was steady, assessing. "What are you getting at, Miss Vale?" "I need to take possession of my property, but I have no idea how to even begin. The nephews are already there with their own men, and I suspect they won't simply hand over the keys because a lawyer says the ranch is mine." She took a breath, gathering her courage. "I need someone who knows the ranch, who can help me claim what's rightfully mine. I can't pay you right now, but once I have access to the ranch accounts, I can pay you fairly for your help." Tyler was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching her face. "Those nephews have 8 men with them now, all hard cases. Marcus Montgomery has a mean streak a mile wide and Luther's not much better. What you're proposing could get dangerous. I know. Catherine lifted her chin. But that ranch is all I have now. It's the difference between survival and spending the rest of my life scrubbing floors for pennies. I'm not asking you to fight for me just to help me understand what I'm dealing with and maybe give me a chance at making this work. Something shifted in Tyler's expression. Jacob Montgomery was a good man, fair and honest, which is rarer than gold in this business. His nephews are neither of those things. I don't like seeing them try to steal what he clearly wanted you to have. He extended his hand. I'll help you, Miss Vale. But you should know what you're walking into. This won't be easy. Catherine shook his hand, feeling the calluses that matched her own, the strength in his grip. Nothing in my life has ever been easy, Mr. Callahan. I'm used to hard work. Call me Tyler, he said, and she caught the hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. If we're going to do this, we'd better start planning. Do you have somewhere we can talk privately? They ended up at the small church at the edge of town, sitting in the back pew while Catherine explained everything the lawyer had told her. Tyler listened intently, occasionally asking questions about the specifics of the will and the legal transfer of ownership. The good news is the law is on your side, he said when she'd finished. The bad news is that law is 15 miles away in town, and the ranch is its own world. Marcus and Luther have been acting like they own the place for months now, spending money, making promises to their crew, and selling off cattle at prices that would make your head spin. Jacob was sick for a long time before he died, and toward the end, he wasn't able to manage things the way he used to. That's when the nephews moved in. Why didn't you stop them? Catherine asked, not accusingly but genuinely curious. Tyler's jaw tightened. I tried. I sent word to Jacob, but they intercepted the messages. When I confronted them directly, Marcus made it clear that when Jacob died, I'd be out on my ear. I've been walking a tightrope ever since, trying to protect what I could without getting myself killed or the other ranch hands who stayed loyal hurt in the process. How many hands stayed loyal out of the original crew? Maybe 4 or 5. The rest either left when the nephews started bringing in their own men or decided their loyalty could be bought. He met her eyes. The ones who stayed are good men, but they are outnumbered, and they've been living under threat for months. We'll need to figure out how to approach this carefully. They talked for hours, Tyler explaining the layout of the ranch, the routines, where the accounts and records were kept, and most importantly, where the nephews and their men spent their time. Catherine absorbed every detail, her natural intelligence and years of observation serving her well. There's one thing working in our favor, Tyler said, as afternoon shadows lengthened across the church floor. The fall roundup is starting next week. That's when we gather the cattle from the summer range and prepare them for sale. It's all hands on deck, and the crew will be spread out across the range for days at a time. If we're going to make our move, that would be the time to do it. What kind of move? Catherine asked. You need to physically take possession of the main house and the office where all the records are kept. More importantly, you need to do it in a way that makes it clear you're the legal owner and that anyone who opposes you is breaking the law. Tyler leaned back against the pew. I've been thinking, what if we bring the sheriff out to the ranch? If you arrive with legal authority at your back, it makes the situation a lot clearer. Catherine nodded slowly. That makes sense, but will the sheriff actually help? I'm nobody in this town, and the Montgomerys have money and influence. The Montgomerys had money and influence, Tyler corrected. Jacob did, at least. Marcus and Luther just have their uncle's reputation, and it's wearing thin. I know Sheriff Dawson. He's a decent man who respects the law. If you come to him with the will and the lawyer's documentation, I think he'll do his duty." They decided to approach Sheriff Dawson the next morning. As Catherine walked back to the boarding house, her mind was spinning with plans and possibilities. She'd woken up yesterday as the poorest woman in town, and she'd go to sleep tonight as the owner of 40,000 acres, at least on paper. Making that reality would take everything she had and more. Tyler Callahan watched her go, his own thoughts troubled. He'd been around enough to recognize a hard luck story when he saw one, but there was something different about Catherine Vale. She had steel in her spine despite her shabby dress and worn shoes. When she'd shaken his hand, he'd felt the strength in her grip, the determination. She wasn't a pampered town girl playing at ranching, she was a survivor, and survivors were dangerous when cornered. He'd loved the double M from the first moment he'd ridden into that valley 5 years ago. He'd worked his way up from hired hand to foreman through sheer dedication and skill, and Jacob Montgomery had recognized his worth. The old man had taught him things, trusted him with important decisions, and Tyler had repaid that trust with loyalty. Watching Marcus and Luther try to destroy everything Jacob had built had been eating at him for months. Now here was this slip of a woman, offering him a chance to fight back. It was probably foolish. It would definitely be dangerous. But as he rode back to the ranch that evening, Tyler felt more alive than he had in months. Sheriff Dawson was a grizzled man in his 50s with gray threading through his dark beard and eyes that had seen too much to be easily fooled. He listened to Catherine's story while Tyler stood beside her in the small sheriff's office, his presence a silent support. "I heard about Montgomery's will," Dawson said when she'd finished. "Also heard his nephews are planning to contest it. They've been spreading rumors that you somehow influenced the old man, that he wasn't in his right mind." Catherine's cheeks flushed with anger. "I cleaned his house twice a week. That's all. If he chose to leave me his property, that was his decision to make." "I believe you," Dawson said, raising a hand to calm her. "I knew Jacob Montgomery for 20 years. He was sharp as a tack right up until the end, and he wasn't the kind of man to be manipulated. If he left you that ranch, he had his reasons." He leaned back in his chair. "The problem is, possession is 9/10 of the law out here. Marcus and Luther are already living at the ranch, acting as owners. Removing them won't be as simple as showing up with papers." "That's why we need you to come with us," Tyler said. "Miss Vale has the legal right to that property. If the nephews refuse to leave, they're trespassing, and that's a matter for the law." Dawson studied them both carefully. "Tyler, you know those boys have been hiring guns. This could turn ugly fast." "It could," Tyler agreed. "But it could also go smooth if they see a badge and understand they're on the wrong side of the law. Most hired guns don't get paid enough to face down a sheriff and risk hanging for murder. You're asking me to ride out there and potentially start a range war." "I'm asking you to enforce the law," Catherine said quietly. "I know I'm nobody in this town, Sheriff. I've been invisible my whole life, just another poor woman trying to survive. But Mr. Montgomery saw something in me worth rewarding, and I intend to honor his wishes by taking care of the property he left me. I'm not trying to cheat anyone or take what isn't mine. This is mine, legally and fairly. All I want is what I'm entitled to." Something in her words seemed to reach Dawson. He sighed heavily. "All right, I'll ride out there with you. But we do this smart, understand? We go in during the roundup like Tyler suggested, when most of the crew is away from the main house. We present the papers, give the nephews a chance to leave peacefully, and hope they have enough sense to accept reality." He fixed Tyler with a stern look. "And there's no gunplay unless absolutely necessary for defense. I won't have bloodshed over property if it can be avoided." "Agreed," Tyler said firmly. Catherine nodded her assent. They spent the next few days preparing. Tyler discreetly contacted the ranch hands he trusted, letting them know what was coming and asking for their support. Catherine met again with Mr. Pemberton, the lawyer, who prepared copies of all the relevant documents and wrote a formal letter demanding that Marcus and Luther Montgomery vacate the property immediately. "I wish I could come with you," Pemberton said, but his advanced age and poor health made the hard ride impossible. "But these documents are ironclad. Any judge in the territory would uphold them." The night before they were set to ride out, Catherine lay awake in her attic corner, fear and excitement warring in her chest. Everything was about to change, one way or another. Either she'd claim her inheritance and begin a new life, or she'd fail spectacularly and be right back where she started or worse. She thought about Tyler Callahan, the quiet cowboy who had agreed to help her without hesitation once he understood the situation. There was something solid about him, reliable. In the few days they'd spent planning together, she'd come to appreciate his calm intelligence and the way he listened to her ideas without dismissing them simply because she was a woman who knew nothing about ranching. He explained things clearly, answered her endless questions with patience, and treated her like a partner in this venture rather than a helpless female he was rescuing. She couldn't deny that she found him attractive, though she tried not to dwell on it. His easy strength, the competent way he moved, the rare smile that transformed his serious face, all of it appealed to her in ways she hadn't experienced before. But she was realistic enough to know that whatever lay ahead, romance was a luxury she couldn't afford. She needed Tyler's help, his expertise, and potentially his protection. Complicating that with personal feelings would be foolish. They left Malad City at dawn, 3 riders heading north into the mountains. Sheriff Dawson rode his sturdy roan, Tyler on his bay, and Catherine on a gentle mare Tyler had borrowed from the livery. She'd never spent much time on horseback, couldn't afford to, but she was a quick learner and determined not to slow them down. The country was beautiful in the early autumn light, golden grasslands giving way to pine-covered slopes, with the first hints of changing leaves painting splashes of orange and red across the mountainsides. Catherine had lived in Idaho for 5 years but had rarely ventured far from town. Seeing this landscape, knowing that she owned a piece of it, filled her with a strange mixture of awe and terror. "The ranch headquarters is just over this ridge," Tyler said as they climbed a final slope in the early afternoon. "Once we're in the valley, we'll be visible from the house." "There's no element of surprise." "Good," Dawson said. "I don't want them thinking we're sneaking up on them. We're here openly and legally." They crested the ridge, and Catherine caught her first glimpse of the Double M Ranch. The valley spread out below them, vast and green, with a river cutting through it like a silver ribbon. Cattle dotted the grasslands in small groups, and she could see riders in the distance working the herds. The ranch buildings sat in a cluster near the river, a large 2-story house with a broad porch, several barns and outbuildings, a bunkhouse, and various corrals and pens. It was more than Catherine had imagined, a complete world unto itself. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "It is," Tyler agreed, and she heard genuine affection in his voice. "Jacob built this place from nothing over 30 years. Every fence post, every building, every head of cattle represents years of hard work." As they rode down into the valley, Catherine could feel eyes on them. Several cowboys stopped their work to watch the 3 riders approach. Tyler raised a hand in greeting to a few, and they returned the gesture, though their expressions were wary. They dismounted in front of the main house. The front door opened before they could knock, and 2 men stepped out onto the porch. They had to be the nephews. They shared the Montgomery family resemblance with their late uncle, though both had gone soft around the middle from easy living. Marcus, the older, had mean little eyes above a thick mustache. Luther was slightly younger, slimmer, with a nervous energy that expressed itself in constant fidgeting. "Well, well," Marcus said, his voice dripping with false joviality. "Sheriff Dawson Tyler. And this must be the famous Miss Vale, the cleaning woman who thinks she owns our ranch." "It's not your ranch," Catherine said, keeping her voice steady. "It's mine. Your uncle left it to me in his will, properly witnessed and filed with the court." "Our uncle was a sick old man who didn't know what he was doing," Luther said shrilly. "You took advantage of him, wormed your way into his confidence when he was vulnerable." "That's enough," Sheriff Dawson said firmly. He pulled the documents from his jacket and held them up. "I've seen the will, examined the legal transfer of property, and spoken with the lawyer who handled everything. This ranch belongs to Catherine Vale, legally and without question. You two are trespassing, and I'm here to order you to leave the premises immediately." Marcus's face darkened. "You're going to take her side, over family, over men of standing in this community." "I'm not taking sides," Dawson said. "I'm enforcing the law. You have no legal claim to this property. Your uncle had every right to leave his estate to whomever he chose, and he chose Miss Vale." "We're contesting the will," Marcus said. "Until the courts settle this, we have just as much right to be here as she does." "Actually, you don't," Tyler said quietly. "Contesting a will doesn't give you rights to the property while the case is being heard. Miss Vale is the legal owner unless and until a court says otherwise, which means you're squatting on her land." Several men had emerged from the bunkhouse and various outbuildings, drawn by the confrontation. Catherine recognized the type hard men with guns on their hips, the kind who hired out for trouble. Her heart hammered in her chest, but she forced herself to stand tall. "I don't want trouble," she said, addressing Marcus and Luther directly. "But I won't be bullied out of what's mine. Your uncle made his wishes clear, and I intend to honor them by taking care of this ranch properly. You can leave peacefully, or the sheriff can arrest you for trespassing. Your choice." "You think you can run this place?" Marcus laughed harshly. "You're a cleaning woman. You don't know the first thing about cattle or horses or managing a spread this size. You'll run it into the ground within a year, and then where will all these men be?" He gestured at the assembled hands. "Out of work, that's where. At least we know what we're doing." "The hell you do," said a voice from the side. An older cowboy with a weathered face stepped forward. "You've been running this place into the ground for months, selling off stock cheap to line your own pockets, letting fences fall apart and treating the hands like dirt. Mr. Montgomery would be spinning in his grave if he could see what you've done." "Watch your mouth, Hank," Luther said, his hand dropping to his gun. "Leave your iron where it is," Dawson said sharply. "I won't have shooting over this." Tyler moved almost imperceptibly, positioning himself slightly in front of Catherine, and she realized he was prepared to shield her if violence erupted. The gesture touched her even as it terrified her that such a thing might be necessary. "Here's what's going to happen," Marcus said, his voice dropping to something cold and dangerous. "We're not leaving. This ranch should have been ours from the start, and we're not about to let some nobody take it from us. You want us out, Sheriff? You'll have to drag us out. And you'd better bring an army, because we've got plenty of men who'll fight to protect what's rightfully ours." "You're making a mistake," Dawson warned. "No, she made the mistake," Marcus said, pointing at Catherine. "Coming out here thinking she could waltz in and take everything. This is the frontier, girl. Things don't always go according to what some piece of paper says. Sometimes the strong take what they want, and the weak learn their place." Catherine felt anger burn through her fear. She'd spent her entire life being told she was nothing, being pushed aside and overlooked. Something in her snapped. I may be poor and I may be a woman, but I'm not weak, she said, her voice ringing clear across the yard. I've survived things that would break softer people. I've gone hungry so I could pay my rent. I've worked until my hands bled and my back felt like it would snap. And I've never, not once, tried to take something that wasn't mine or hurt someone who couldn't defend themselves. She took a step forward, ignoring Tyler's warning hand on her arm. Your uncle saw something in me worth rewarding, and maybe it was exactly that I'm not like you. I don't think the world owes me something just because of who my family is. I work for what I have, and I treat people with decency. That's more than either of you can say. For a moment, silence hung over the ranch yard. Then Hank, the older cowboy, began to clap slowly. Another hand joined him, then another. Within seconds, half the men in the yard were applauding, and Catherine saw rage flood Marcus Montgomery's face. "Get out," he snarled. "All of you get out. This is our property until a court says different, and you're all trespassing." "We'll be back," Dawson said grimly. "And next time, I'll have federal marshals with me if necessary. You're on the wrong side of the law, Marcus, and that never ends well." They remounted their horses, Tyler helping Catherine up with a steadying hand. As they rode back toward the ridge, Catherine fought against the tears of frustration burning behind her eyes. They'd failed. The nephews were still in possession, and she was no closer to claiming her inheritance than she'd been before. But Tyler rode up beside her as they climbed out of the valley. "That wasn't a failure," he said quietly. "You showed them and everyone watching that you're serious, that you have legal right on your side, and that you won't be intimidated. More importantly, you showed the hands that you're worth following. Did you see how many of them applauded?" "Including you," Hank said, riding up on Catherine's other side. She recognized him as the cowboy who had spoken up in her defense. "I'm Hank Morrison, madam. Been working the Double M for 12 years. Tyler here told us you might be riding out, and I wanted you to know that some of us are ready to back you when the time comes." "Thank you," Catherine managed, her voice thick with emotion. "That means more than you know." "Jacob Montgomery was a good man and a fair boss," Hank said. "If he wanted you to have this place, then that's good enough for me. Those nephews are poison. Sooner they're gone, the better for everyone." They made camp that night about 5 miles from the ranch, unwilling to ride all the way back to town in the dark. As Catherine sat by the fire wrapped in a borrowed bedroll, Sheriff Dawson outlined his next steps. "I'll send telegrams to the federal marshal in Boise and to the territorial judge. With their backing, we can force the issue if necessary. But I have to warn you, Miss Vale, this could take weeks or even months to resolve legally." "I don't have months," Catherine said. "I have 17 cents and a rented corner of an attic. If the ranch can't generate income because the nephews are stealing everything, I'll starve before any judge makes a ruling." "We'll figure something out," Tyler said. He'd been quiet since they'd made camp, his face thoughtful in the firelight. "There might be another way." "What way?" Catherine asked. "The fall sale. Every year we drive a big herd to the railhead in Pocatello. That happens in about 3 weeks. The nephews will need every available hand for that drive. It's a week's hard work moving that many cattle. While they're gone, the ranch will be nearly empty." Understanding dawned on Dawson's face. "You want her to take possession while they're away. More than that, I want to make sure that when they get back, they find the situation changed enough that fighting becomes pointless." Tyler looked at Catherine. "Think about it. If you're living in the main house with clear legal authority, with the loyal hands backing you, and with the ranch operations continuing smoothly under your ownership, what can they do? Start a shooting war and risk hanging? Or accept reality and leave?" "They could still fight," Catherine said. "They could. But it would be a lot harder to justify, especially if we make sure there are witnesses to everything, respectable people from town who can testify that you took possession peacefully and legally." Tyler warmed to his theme. "We get Pemberton out here, maybe the mayor, a few prominent citizens, make it official and public. Then the nephews come back to find themselves outmaneuvered." "It's risky," Dawson said, but Catherine could hear the approval in his voice. "But it might work. And it avoids bloodshed, which has to be the priority." "I'll need help," Catherine said. "I don't know how to run a ranch. I don't even know what questions to ask." "You'll have help," Tyler assured her. "Hank and the other loyal hands will back you. And I'll be there to teach you everything you need to know. Running a ranch is hard work, but you've never shied from hard work." They talked long into the night, refining the plan. By the time Catherine finally fell asleep under the vast Idaho sky, she felt hope rekindling in her chest. It wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind. Catherine moved from her attic corner to a modest room at the hotel, an expense she could barely afford but which Tyler insisted was necessary to establish her position as the ranch owner. She met with Pemberton repeatedly, preparing all the legal documentation they'd need. She also began learning everything she could about ranching, spending hours with Tyler as he explained the economics of cattle, the seasonal rhythms of ranch work, and the myriad details involved in managing such a large operation. Tyler proved to be a patient teacher, and Catherine was a quick study. She had a sharp mind that had never had much opportunity for education, and she soaked up information like a sponge. They'd sit in the hotel restaurant over coffee, Tyler sketching diagrams of the ranch on scraps of paper, explaining water rights and grazing rotation and breeding stock. As they spent more time together, Catherine found herself increasingly drawn to him. It wasn't just his physical presence, though she couldn't deny the flutter she felt when he smiled at her or when their hands accidentally brushed. It was his character, his quiet integrity, his dedication to doing what was right even when it was difficult, his respect for her despite her lack of experience. He never talked down to her or dismissed her questions as foolish. He took her seriously, and that meant everything. Tyler, for his part, was fighting his own battles. He'd known plenty of women in his 31 years, but none quite like Catherine Vale. She had a strength that had nothing to do with physical power and everything to do with sheer determination. She'd been beaten down by life, but refused to stay down. There was a brightness in her, a fundamental decency that reminded him why he'd fallen in love with the West in the first place, the idea that out here, you could be judged by what you did rather than where you came from. He caught himself thinking about her at odd moments, remembering the way she'd stood up to Marcus Montgomery without flinching, or the concentration on her face as she studied the maps and documents, or the rare smile that transformed her entire appearance. He tried to keep his feelings professional, reminding himself that she was his employer or would be, once she actually took possession of the ranch. Getting romantically involved would complicate an already complex situation. But late at night, alone in his room at the boarding house where the ranch hands stayed when in town, he let himself imagine what it might be like to court Catherine properly, to earn her affection, maybe even to build a life together at the Double M. Then he'd shake his head at his own foolishness. She was the owner, and he was the foreman. That was a line he shouldn't cross, no matter how much he might want to. Word came from the ranch that the cattle drive was preparing to leave. Hank rode into town to deliver the message personally, meeting with Tyler and Catherine in the privacy of Pemberton's office. "They're pulling out day after tomorrow," Hank reported, "taking about 2,000 head to the railhead. Marcus, Luther, and all their hired guns will be going. They don't trust anyone else with handling the money from the sale. That'll leave maybe 3 men at the ranch, and one of those is old Charlie who can barely walk. It's the best chance you'll get." "Who are the other 2?" Tyler asked. "Pete Wilkins and Jack Samuels. Both are loyal to the nephews, but they're not fighters. Confronted with legal papers and the sheriff, I think they'll fold." Hank pulled out a folded paper. "I drew you a map of where everyone sleeps and where the important papers are kept. Marcus has been keeping the ranch books in Jacob's old office, though from what I've seen when I've been able to sneak a look, they're a mess of lies and theft." Catherine studied the map, memorizing the layout. "What about the other hands? The ones who have been loyal to Mr. Montgomery's memory?" "There's 6 of us all told. We'll be ready. When you ride in, we'll make it clear we're on your side." Hank met her eyes directly. "Some of the boys are nervous about backing a woman owner. I won't lie about that. But I've told them that Jacob Montgomery was no fool, and if he trusted you, that's good enough. They'll give you a fair chance to prove yourself." "That's all I ask," Catherine said. 2 days later, Catherine watched from a hillside as the cattle drive departed the Double M. It was an impressive sight, 2,000 head of cattle being pushed along by a dozen riders. Dust rising in great clouds, the sound of lowing cattle and shouting men carrying across the valley. Marcus and Luther rode at the head of the column, and Catherine felt a grim satisfaction at seeing them go. It'll take them 2 days to reach the railhead, at least a day to load the cattle and handle the sale, and 2 days back, Tyler said, watching beside her. "That gives us 5 days minimum, maybe a week if things go slow. Enough time to get you established." Sheriff Dawson had returned to town to maintain appearances, but he deputized Tyler for the occasion and would return with the witnesses once they had possession. For now, it was just Catherine, Tyler, and the determination to see this through. They rode down to the ranch in mid-morning, approaching openly as they had before. The 3 men left behind came out to meet them, but their demeanor was entirely different without the nephew's presence. Pete Wilkins and Jack Samuels looked nervous, and old Charlie just seemed curious. "Miss Vale," Pete said uncertainly, "we were told you might try something like this." "I'm not trying anything," Catherine said calmly. She dismounted and faced the 3 men squarely, holding up her legal documents. "I'm simply taking possession of my property. This ranch was left to me by Jacob Montgomery in his legal will. Sheriff Dawson has reviewed all the paperwork and confirmed its validity. Marcus and Luther Montgomery are trespassers, and their presence here has been tolerated only because I wanted to avoid violence. But they're gone now, and I'm moving in." "Marcus said we're supposed to stop you," Jack said, but his heart clearly wasn't in it. "Stop me how?" Catherine asked directly. "By shooting an unarmed woman who has legal right on her side. Is that really what you want to be known for? Is that worth hanging?" The 2 younger men exchanged glances. Old Charlie spoke up, his voice raspy with age. "Jacob Montgomery was my friend for 30 years. If he wanted this girl to have the ranch, then she should have it. I'm not standing in her way." "Charlie," Pete protested, but the old man cut him off. "No. I've watched those nephews steal and lie for months now, and I'm done with it. They're not the law and they're not the owners. She is." He nodded to Catherine. "Welcome home, Miss Vale." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you." With Charlie's defection, the other 2 men's resistance crumbled. Pete and Jack agreed to stay out of the way while Catherine took possession. Though they made it clear they'd be leaving before Marcus and Luther returned, neither wanted to face the nephew's wrath. Within hours, the ranch was transformed. Hank and the loyal hands appeared as if by magic, having been watching from various vantage points. They helped Catherine move into the main house, and she stood in the grand front room feeling overwhelmed by the sheer scale of it. She'd cleaned this room dozens of times, but she'd never imagined actually living here. Tyler found her standing motionless in Jacob Montgomery's study, staring at the large desk and the filled bookcases. "Feeling overwhelmed?" he asked gently. "Completely," Catherine admitted. "Tyler, I don't belong here. This desk is worth more than I've earned in my entire life. These books, these furnishings, this entire house, it's all so far beyond anything I've known." He came to stand beside her, his presence solid and comforting. Jacob Montgomery came from nothing too. His father was a failed prospector who died drunk in a mining camp. Jacob started with $100 and a dream. He built all this through hard work and smart decisions. You can do the same. He knew about cattle and ranching. "And he'll teach you. I'll teach you." Tyler turned her gently to face him, his hands on her shoulders. "Catherine, you have something more important than knowledge. You have integrity and determination. Knowledge can be learned. Character can't. The men will respect you for who you are, and I'll help you learn the rest." She looked up into his blue eyes and felt something shift in her chest. "Why are you helping me, Tyler? Really? You don't owe me anything." He was quiet for a moment, his hands still resting on her shoulders, his gaze searching her face. "Because Jacob Montgomery deserved better than having his life's work stolen by those worthless nephews. Because I believe in justice and the rule of law. And because you're worth helping." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Catherine felt her breath catch as Tyler's head lowered slightly, his eyes dropping to her lips. But then he stepped back, releasing her shoulders, and the moment broke. "We should inventory the office," he said, his voice slightly rough. "See what kind of mess the nephews left in the books." Catherine nodded, trying to ignore the disappointment flooding through her. Yes, of course. They spent the afternoon going through papers and account books. It was worse than Tyler had expected. The nephews had been systematically looting the ranch, selling off cattle and equipment and pocketing the proceeds while recording false transactions in the books. They'd run up debts in the ranch's name at various merchants, buying luxury goods for themselves. They'd even taken out a loan against the property, though Catherine's ownership meant that loan was legally invalid. "This is criminal," Catherine said, staring at the evidence of theft. "They've stolen thousands of dollars." "Which means they have even more reason to fight you," Tyler said grimly. "When they get back and find you in possession, they'll know all this will come to light. They could face prison." A chill ran down Catherine's spine. "You're saying they'll be desperate. I'm saying we need to be ready for trouble." Tyler looked at her seriously. "I want you to learn to shoot. Not to kill anyone, but to defend yourself if necessary. And we need to get those witnesses out here sooner rather than later. The more official your takeover is, the harder it'll be for the nephews to contest it with violence." They sent Hank to town that evening with messages for Sheriff Dawson, Pemberton, and several prominent town citizens. By the next afternoon, a small caravan had arrived at the ranch. Mayor Thompson, the banker Mr. Holloway, the owner of the general store, and 3 other respected citizens rode in with the sheriff and the lawyer. Catherine gave them a tour of the ranch, showing them the books and explaining the situation. She dressed in one of the plain but clean dresses she'd brought from town, and she spoke clearly and confidently about her plans for managing the property. Tyler stood by her side, occasionally adding details about the ranch operations, his support lending her credibility. By evening, all the witnesses had signed documents attesting to Catherine's legal possession of the property and her competent assumption of management. Mayor Thompson, a portly man with shrewd eyes, took Catherine aside before departing. "Miss Vale, I'll be honest with you. When I first heard about this situation, I thought you were just a gold digger who'd somehow tricked a sick old man. But having met you and seen how you conduct yourself, I'm revising that opinion. You have backbone, which is more than can be said for Montgomery's nephews. If you need support in town, you'll have it. Thank you, Mayor. That means a great deal. After the witnesses departed, Catherine finally allowed herself to relax slightly. She was here in her house on her ranch. The first major hurdle had been cleared. But she knew the hardest part was still coming. Tyler had insisted on staying at the main house rather than the bunkhouse, sleeping in one of the downstairs guest rooms so he'd be close if trouble arose. That first night, Catherine lay in the large bedroom that had been Jacob Montgomery's, staring at the ceiling and listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the house. Everything had changed so fast. A month ago, she'd been scrubbing floors. Now she owned all this. She thought about Tyler sleeping downstairs, so close and yet so far. The almost kiss in the study haunted her. She'd seen the attraction in his eyes, felt it in the gentle way he touched her. But he'd pulled back, maintaining professional distance. Was it because he didn't want to complicate their working relationship? Or because he saw her as his employer and thought a romance would be inappropriate? Or maybe he simply didn't feel the same depth of attraction that she did, and she was reading too much into kind gestures and professional support. Catherine turned over, punching her pillow in frustration. She had a ranch to learn to run and nephews to fend off. Romance was a distraction she couldn't afford, no matter how much her heart insisted otherwise. The next few days fell into a rhythm. Tyler took Catherine out each morning to show her different aspects of the ranch. They rode the fence lines, checked on the cattle in the near pastures, visited the line shacks where cowboys stayed during the seasonal work. Catherine absorbed everything, asking constant questions and taking notes in a small journal she'd started keeping. The ranch hands watched her with cautious interest. She made a point of learning all their names, asking about their families, and listening when they talked about the work. Tyler had warned her that cowboys could be rough and suspicious of women in authority, but she found that most of them responded well to genuine respect and interest. One afternoon, she was watching several hands working to break a young horse when one of them was thrown hard, landing badly and clearly in pain. Without thinking, Catherine ran to help, kneeling in the dirt beside the injured man despite her dress. "Don't move yet," she said, her hands checking him carefully for obvious breaks. Years of caring for sick neighbors had given her basic medical knowledge. "Where does it hurt worst?" "My shoulder," the cowboy gasped. His name was Danny, she remembered, barely 20 years old. Catherine felt carefully around the joint and determined it was dislocated rather than broken. "This is going to hurt, but I can pop it back in if you trust me." "You know how?" Danny asked through gritted teeth. "I've done it before. My mother was a midwife and a healer. She taught me some things before she died." Tyler had come running when he saw the fall. "Catherine, maybe we should take him into town to the doctor. That's hours of agony for him in a wagon. I can fix it now." She met Danny's eyes. "Your choice." "Do it," Danny said. Catherine worked quickly and surely, manipulating the joint until it popped back into place with an audible sound that made several watching cowboys wince. Danny cried out, but then sagged with relief as the worst of the pain ended. "Keep it immobilized for a week," Catherine instructed. "I'll make you a sling, and if it keeps hurting or swells up, we'll get you to a doctor, understand?" "Yes, madam," Danny said, looking at her with new respect. "Thank you." Word of the incident spread through the ranch. That evening, when Catherine entered the dining hall where the hands took their meals, she received nods and greetings that were warmer than before. She'd proven herself useful, proven she was willing to get her hands dirty and help when needed. Tyler caught her after dinner. "That was well done today." "I just did what needed doing," Catherine said. You're winning them over. Not all of them, some will never accept a woman boss, but enough. The ones who matter. He smiled at her, and Catherine felt that now familiar flutter in her chest. Jacob chose well. I hope so. I'm terrified I'll make some terrible decision that ruins everything. You won't. And even if you make mistakes, that's how you learn. Every rancher has made terrible decisions. The successful ones learn from them. Tyler hesitated, then said, "Would you like to sit on the porch for a while? It's a nice evening, and there's something I want to talk to you about." They settled into the rocking chairs on the broad front porch, looking out over the valley as the sun set in glorious shades of orange and purple. Catherine waited, curious about what Tyler wanted to discuss. "The cattle drive will be back soon," he began. "Maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after. When Marcus and Luther return and find you here, things will get tense. I want to make sure you're prepared for what might happen." "I'm prepared," Catherine said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "Are you? Because they might try to physically remove you. They might threaten you or try to intimidate the hands into abandoning you. They might even try to hurt you, Catherine. I need to know you understand the danger." She turned to look at him, seeing genuine worry in his expression. "I understand. But Tyler, I've faced danger my whole life. Poverty is dangerous. Being a woman alone in the world is dangerous. I've dealt with drunk men getting too familiar, with employers who thought I should be grateful for any attention they paid me, with landlords who threatened to throw me out if I didn't provide certain favors. This is just a different kind of danger." Tyler's jaw tightened. "Has anyone ever hurt you? Those employers, those landlords?" "I never let it get that far. I'm good at disappearing, at becoming invisible when I need to." She paused. "But I'm tired of being invisible, Tyler. For the first time in my life, I have a chance to be somebody, to build something real. I'm not running away from the nephews or anyone else. This is my home now, and I'm going to fight for it." He reached over and took her hand, his fingers warm and strong around hers. "Then I'll fight beside you. Whatever happens, you're not alone in this." Catherine looked down at their joined hands, her heart hammering. "Why, Tyler? Why does this matter so much to you?" He was quiet for a long moment, his thumb absently stroking the back of her hand. At first, it was about loyalty to Jacob and hatred for what the nephews were doing. But now, he turned to face her fully. "Now it's about you. I admire you, Catherine. Your courage, your integrity, the way you face down everything life throws at you and keep standing. I want to see you succeed, to see you become the person you're meant to be. And I want to be part of that if you'll let me." Her breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that somewhere along the way, this stopped being just about the ranch for me. It became about you." He raised his free hand to cup her cheek gently. "I'm saying I have feelings for you that go well beyond professional, and I have for a while now. I tried to ignore them, tried to tell myself it was inappropriate, but I can't seem to stop thinking about you." Catherine felt joy flood through her. "I've been thinking about you too, constantly. I thought maybe you didn't see me that way, or that you were keeping distance because I'm technically your employer." "You're more than my employer," Tyler said softly. "Much more." He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. When she didn't, when instead she tilted her face up to his, he closed the final distance and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, a question being asked and answered. Then Catherine's hand came up to rest against his chest, feeling the strong beat of his heart beneath her palm, and the kiss deepened. Tyler's arms came around her, pulling her close, and Catherine felt like something that had been broken inside her was finally being repaired. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Tyler rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the day we met." "I wish you had," Catherine said, then laughed at her own boldness. They sat together on that porch as darkness fell, talking about everything and nothing. Tyler told her about his childhood in Kansas, his decision to head west at 18, the various ranches he'd worked before finding his place at the Double M. Catherine shared her own story, the early happy years before her father's death, the struggle after her mother passed, the parade of menial jobs and harsh employers. "You've survived so much," Tyler said, his arm around her shoulders as they rocked slowly. "You're the strongest person I know." "I don't feel strong. Most of the time I feel terrified." "That's what makes you brave. Courage isn't about not feeling fear. It's about feeling it and moving forward anyway." They heard the cattle drive before they saw it. The sound of thousands of hoofbeats and lowing cattle carried across the valley in the early afternoon, giving Catherine time to prepare herself. Tyler had drilled her on what to say and how to stand firm. Hank and the loyal hands had positioned themselves strategically around the ranch headquarters, visible but not overtly threatening. Sheriff Dawson had ridden out that morning, his presence a clear statement of official support for Catherine's position. Catherine stood on the porch in her best dress, Tyler beside her, as Marcus and Luther Montgomery rode into the yard and pulled up short at the sight before them. The transformation on Marcus's face from tired satisfaction to shocked fury was almost comical. He dismounted in a rush, stalking toward the porch. "What the hell is this? What are you doing here?" "I live here," Catherine said calmly. "This is my ranch and I've taken legal possession, as is my right." "Like hell you have," Luther sputtered, joining his brother. "You have no right to be here. We'll have you arrested for trespassing." "Actually, you're the ones trespassing," Sheriff Dawson said, stepping out from the side of the house where he'd been waiting. "Miss Vale has established legal residence with proper documentation and multiple witnesses from town. Any attempt to remove her by force will result in your arrest." Marcus's hand dropped to his gun, and Catherine's heart leaped into her throat. But Tyler moved faster, his own hand coming to rest on his holstered weapon. Around the yard she saw the loyal hands shift position, their intentions clear. "Think carefully," Tyler said quietly. "You're outnumbered, outgunned, and on the wrong side of the law. Drawing that weapon would be the last mistake you ever make." For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Then Marcus slowly raised his hands away from his gun. "This isn't over," he growled. "We have lawyers. We'll fight this in court." "You're welcome to try," Catherine said. "But while you're doing that, you need to leave this property immediately. Take your personal belongings and go. The hired guns you brought with you can collect their final pay from the ranch office and then leave as well. Any man who wants to stay on as a legitimate ranch hand following my orders is welcome to do so." "You think you can run this place?" Marcus laughed harshly. "You'll fail within 6 months and then you'll come crawling to us, begging to sell. If I fail, it will be on my own terms, not because you sabotaged me." Catherine descended the porch steps, moving to stand directly in front of Marcus. She had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes, but she didn't flinch. "I know what you've been doing. Stealing from the ranch accounts, selling off cattle and pocketing the money, running up debts in the ranch's name. I have the books and I've documented everything. If you try to fight me in court, I'll bring criminal charges against you for theft and fraud. So you can either leave quietly and be grateful I'm letting you go, or you can push this and end up in prison. Your choice." Marcus's face went white, then red. "You're bluffing." "I never bluff, Mr. Montgomery. I don't have that luxury. Everything I have is invested in this ranch, and I will protect it with everything I've got. That includes sending you to prison if necessary." The brothers exchanged looks. Luther seemed ready to fold, but Marcus's pride wouldn't let him surrender so easily. "We'll need time to gather our things." "You have 2 hours," Tyler said. After that, anyone still on the property gets escorted off by the sheriff. Catherine watched as the brothers stalked away toward the house, arguing in fierce whispers. She was shaking, but she didn't let it show until they were out of sight. Then her knees nearly buckled and Tyler's arm came around her waist, supporting her. "Breathe," he murmured. "You were magnificent. Look." She followed his gaze to see the hired guns the nephews had brought in, already collecting their horses and preparing to leave. None of them looked interested in fighting a legal battle for employers who couldn't pay them. Within minutes, they were riding out. The 2 hours felt like an eternity. Marcus and Luther packed their belongings, loading them onto a wagon with angry, jerky movements. Several times, Catherine saw Marcus staring at the house with such hatred that she felt cold despite the warm afternoon. But eventually, they were done. Marcus climbed onto the wagon seat and looked down at Catherine one last time. "You'll regret this, I promise you that. The only thing I regret is that your uncle didn't live to see the ranch in good hands," Catherine replied. After they were gone, Catherine finally allowed herself to collapse into one of the porch chairs, her whole body shaking with reaction. Tyler knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. "It's over. The worst part is over. You did it, Catherine. You claimed your inheritance." "We did it," she corrected, squeezing his hands. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Tyler. Without your help, your knowledge, your support. You've given me everything." "Not everything," he said, his eyes intense on hers. "Not yet." Before she could ask what he meant, he was kissing her again, and Catherine forgot about the Montgomerys, about the ranch, about everything except the feel of his lips on hers, and the certainty that this, right here, was exactly where she belonged. The next few months were a whirlwind of learning and hard work. Catherine threw herself into understanding every aspect of ranch management. She rode out with the hands daily, learning to judge the condition of cattle, to spot illness or injury, to understand the subtle signs of weather changes that could mean the difference between good grazing and disaster. Her hands, already rough from years of hard labor, developed new calluses from handling ropes and reins. Tyler was patient and thorough in his teaching, but he also made sure she learned from the other hands. Hank taught her about horse breeding and training. Old Charlie shared 50 years of wisdom about reading the land and predicting weather. Even young Danny, recovered from his shoulder injury, showed her tricks for working cattle more efficiently. The ranch began to thrive under proper management. Catherine discovered she had a head for numbers and organization. She restructured the accounts, paid off the debts the nephews had incurred, and established credit with merchants based on honest dealing. She also instituted small changes that made the hands' lives better: food in the bunkhouse, fair wages paid on time, medical care when needed. In return, the men worked harder and more loyally than they had in years. Marcus and Luther did file a legal challenge to the will, but it went nowhere. The evidence of Jacob Montgomery's sound mind and clear intentions was overwhelming, and the judge dismissed their case within weeks. The brothers left Idaho shortly after, reportedly heading to California, and Catherine heard no more from them. As autumn deepened into winter, Catherine and Tyler's relationship deepened as well. They were discreet around the ranch hands, not wanting to complicate the working relationships, but everyone knew. It was obvious in the way they looked at each other, the way Tyler found excuses to stand close to Catherine, the way she smiled when he entered a room. They'd been sitting in the study one evening in November, going over the winter supply orders, when Tyler suddenly set down his pen and looked at her seriously. "Catherine, we need to talk about us." Her heart skipped. "All right. I care about you, more than care about you. I'm in love with you, and I have been for months now." He stood and came around the desk to take her hands, pulling her to her feet. "You're everything I never knew I was looking for: strong, intelligent, kind, brave. Being with you, helping you build this ranch into something amazing, it's been the best time of my life." "Tyler," Catherine breathed, her eyes filling with tears. "I love you too, so much it scares me sometimes." "Then marry me." He dropped to one knee, still holding her hands. "I know I'm just a cowboy with nothing but my skills and my saddle. I know you own all this and I'm your employee, but I'm asking anyway because I can't imagine my life without you in it. Catherine Vale, will you marry me?" Catherine pulled him to his feet, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes. Yes, of course, yes. And you're not just a cowboy, Tyler Callahan. You're the man who believed in me when no one else did. You're my partner in every way that matters. Of course I'll marry you." Their kiss was interrupted by cheering from outside the study window. They broke apart to see several ranch hands quickly trying to look innocent, obviously having been eavesdropping. "I think they approve," Tyler said, grinning. They were married in the Malad City church on a snowy December day. The whole town turned out, curious to see the woman who'd gone from cleaning floors to owning the largest ranch in the region, and smart enough to marry the man who'd helped her claim it. Catherine wore a simple but beautiful dress of deep blue, and Tyler wore his best suit, his hair neatly trimmed and his boots polished to a shine. As they said their vows, Catherine looked into Tyler's eyes and felt overwhelming gratitude for the chain of events that had brought them to this moment. Jacob Montgomery's kindness, her own courage in claiming what was rightfully hers, Tyler's steadfast support and growing love, all of it had led here, to this new beginning. The ranch prospered over the following years. Catherine proved to be an astute manager with a gift for innovation. She was one of the first ranchers in the region to experiment with crossbreeding to improve stock quality. She also established a reputation for fair dealing and honest business practices that made the Double M name respected throughout Idaho and beyond. Tyler continued as foreman, though everyone understood he was far more than that. He and Catherine worked as true partners, each bringing different strengths to the operation. He handled the day-to-day management of the hands and the cattle work, while she managed the business side and long-term planning. Together, they made decisions about everything from which bulls to buy to how to handle drought years. Their first child was born in the autumn of 1886, a sturdy boy they named Jacob after the man whose generosity had changed Catherine's life. Tyler proved to be a devoted father, his gruff cowboy exterior melting whenever he held his son. Catherine watched them together with joy, thinking how far she'd come from that scared, poor woman standing in a lawyer's office. 2 years later, twin girls arrived, Alina and Sarah, doubling the noise and chaos in the ranch house overnight. Catherine hired help with the house and children, but she still made time to be involved in ranch operations. She'd worked too hard to claim this life to give it up entirely, and Tyler supported her completely. They found ways to balance family and work, often taking the children out on easy rides around the ranch so they could grow up understanding the land they'd one day inherit. The hands grew accustomed to seeing the boss lady riding the fence lines with a baby tied to her back, or negotiating cattle prices with Jacob toddling around her feet. Catherine became something of a legend in the region, the woman who'd inherited a ranch against all odds and made it more successful than it had ever been. But it wasn't all easy. There were hard years when drought killed the grass and they had to sell cattle at a loss. There were bitter winters when they lost stock to cold and predators. There were injuries and accidents, financial pressures and difficult decisions. Through it all, Catherine and Tyler faced everything together, their love and partnership growing stronger with each challenge overcome. One evening in the spring of 1892, Catherine stood on the porch of the ranch house watching the sunset paint the valley in shades of gold. Tyler came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How far we've come. Sometimes I still can't believe this is my life." She leaned back against him. "I keep thinking about the woman I was 8 years ago with 17 cents and no hope for anything better. If someone had told me then that I'd end up here, married to you, with 3 beautiful children and a successful ranch, I never would have believed it." "Jacob saw something in you that you didn't see in yourself yet," Tyler said. "He gave you a chance and you made the most of it." "We made the most of it," Catherine corrected, turning in his arms to face him. "I couldn't have done this without you, Tyler. You're the best thing that ever happened to me." "Second best," he said with a smile. "The best thing was Jacob's will. I'm just the bonus that came with the ranch." She swatted his arm playfully. "You know what I mean." "I do." He grew serious. "And you're the best thing that happened to me too, Catherine. I was just drifting before I met you, moving from job to job with no real purpose. You gave me something to fight for, something to build. You gave me a home and a family and a future. I love you more now than I did the day we married, and I'll love you more tomorrow than I do today." They kissed as the sun sank below the mountains, 2 people who'd found each other against all odds and built something lasting together. Inside the house, young Jacob was supposed to be doing his arithmetic, but instead he was sneaking cookies from the kitchen. The twins were playing with their dolls in the parlor, arguing in the way that only sisters can about whose doll got to be the princess. The house smelled of baking bread and wood smoke, of leather and coffee, all the scents of a well-lived life. Over the following years, the Double M continued to expand and prosper. Catherine and Tyler added more land when neighboring properties came up for sale, eventually owning over 60,000 acres. They built a new barn and a larger bunkhouse, installed a modern windmill system for better water distribution, and became one of the first ranches in Idaho to bring in Hereford cattle to improve their stock. Jacob grew into a serious, hard-working young man who loved the ranch as much as his parents did. He spent hours following his father around, learning everything about cattle and horses and land management. Elena and Sarah were more interested in the business side, often sitting with their mother as she went over the books or wrote correspondence to buyers and suppliers. Catherine made sure all her children could read, write, and cipher fluently, understanding that education was as important as practical skills. The town of Malad City grew as well, and the Vale family Catherine had insisted on keeping her name rather than taking Tyler's, and he'd supported the decision, became pillars of the community. They donated land for a new school, funded a church expansion, and Catherine in particular was known for her generosity to families facing hard times. She never forgot what it was like to be poor and desperate, and she made sure no one in her community went hungry if she could help it. Marcus and Luther Montgomery were occasionally heard of through the years' failed business ventures in San Francisco, trouble with the law in Nevada, a shooting in Arizona that left Marcus dead and Luther crippled. Catherine felt no satisfaction at their downfall, only sadness that they'd wasted their lives on bitterness and greed when they could have done so much more. In the summer of 1899, Catherine and Tyler celebrated their 15th wedding anniversary with a big party at the ranch. Friends and neighbors came from miles around, and the celebration lasted 2 days. As Catherine danced with her husband under lanterns strung from the barn rafters, surrounded by everyone they loved, she felt a contentment so deep it brought tears to her eyes. "Happy?" Tyler asked, seeing her expression. "Beyond measure," she replied. I have everything I ever wanted and things I never knew enough to want. A home, a family, work that matters, and you. Always you. Always me," he agreed, pulling her closer as they swayed to the music. "Until the day I die and beyond, Catherine. You're stuck with me." "Good," she said, resting her head against his chest and listening to the steady beat of his heart. "That's exactly how I want it." Their children grew and eventually brought home partners of their own. Jacob married a rancher's daughter from Montana, a capable woman named Anne who fit into the double M as if she'd always been there. Alina surprised everyone by marrying a lawyer from Boise and moving to the city, though she came home often and stayed involved in the ranch's business affairs. Sarah fell in love with a neighboring rancher's son, and the two families merged their operations, creating an even larger and more successful enterprise. As Catherine and Tyler moved into their 50s and then 60s, they gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations, letting Jacob and his wife take over the management while they served as advisors and enjoyed their grandchildren. But they never left the double M. It was their home, their heart, the place where they'd built their lives together. Catherine sometimes walked up to the ridge above the valley, the place where she'd first seen the ranch all those years ago as a terrified young woman with everything to prove. She'd stand there and look out over the land, the cattle grazing peacefully, the well-maintained buildings, the irrigated fields green even in summer, the children and grandchildren playing in the yard below, and she'd marvel at the journey that had brought her here. Tyler would find her there occasionally, still able to track his wife across the ranch even after all these years. He'd come up beside her and take her hand, his grip still strong despite the arthritis beginning to set in, and they'd stand together in comfortable silence. "You ever regret it?" Catherine asked him once during one of these moments. "Taking a chance on a poor cleaning woman with an impossible dream?" "Never," Tyler said firmly. "You were never impossible, Catherine. You were just waiting for your chance. And when it came, you grabbed it with both hands and held on no matter what. That's not impossible. That's magnificent." She turned to face him, seeing the lines that time had carved in his face, the gray that had replaced the brown in his hair, the slight stoop to his shoulders that hadn't been there when they were young. But his eyes were the same, that clear blue that had first caught her attention so many years ago, filled with love and respect and unwavering devotion. "I love you, Tyler Callahan," she said, the words as true now as they'd been the first time she'd spoken them. "I love you, Catherine Vale," he replied, using the name she'd kept, the name that appeared on all the ranch documents as owner. "I always have and I always will." They walked back down to the house hand in hand as the sun set behind them. Two people who'd found each other against impossible odds and built a life that would endure long after they were gone. The double M would pass to their children and grandchildren, but it would always carry the mark of the poorest woman in town, who'd inherited it all, and the cowboy who'd helped her claim what was rightfully hers. Years later, when both had passed on to their rest within months of each other, because neither wanted to be long without the other, the whole region mourned. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by Catherine's generosity or Tyler's quiet integrity. They were buried side by side on that ridge above the valley, overlooking the land they'd loved and nurtured for over 40 years. A simple stone marked the grave, but it said everything that mattered. Catherine Vale and Tyler Callahan, partners in life, love, and the land. They built something that will last, and it did last. The double M continued to prosper under Jacob's management and then under his children's leadership. The story of Catherine Vale, the cleaning woman who inherited a ranch and turned it into one of the most successful operations in Idaho history, became part of local legend. Young women throughout the region heard the tale and took courage from it, that origins didn't determine destiny, that courage and determination could overcome any obstacle, and that love found in unexpected places could be the strongest foundation of all. The house that Catherine and Tyler had filled with laughter and love continued to be a home for their descendants. The study where they'd planned and dreamed and kissed on that fateful day when he proposed remained largely unchanged, preserved as a tribute to the couple who'd built everything. And on summer evenings, when the light slanted just right through the windows, you could almost see them there, Catherine at the desk going over the books, Tyler leaning against the doorframe watching her with love in his eyes, both of them young again, and full of hope for the future they were building together. The poorest woman in town had claimed her inheritance, and with the help of a devoted cowboy who became the love of her life, she'd turned it into a legacy that would endure for generations. It was a story of justice, courage, love, and the fundamental American belief that anyone, no matter how humble their origins, could build something extraordinary if given the chance and willing to do the work. And every night, as the stars came out over the Idaho Valley, and the cattle settled in the fields and the lights glowed warm in the ranch house windows, the Double M stood as a testament to what two people could accomplish together when they dared to reach for what seemed impossible.